continuing to talk and continuing to work. More than that, I can't say.
Alexander Haig still talking to the Argentines after 3 days. Sovereignty remains the issue. Mrs. Thatcher, back at number 10, waits with senior ministers for news from Buenos Aires. Britain calls up its aged Vulcan bombers in case they're needed. And the Marines are on their way home after a fortnight as prisoners of Argentina. The American Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, said in Buenos Aires tonight that the main sticking point in the Falklands crisis is still the question of sovereignty. And he said it was a subject that was best not raised at the present stage of the talks. Mr. Haig took time off on his 3rd day in the Argentine capital to go to church and to play tennis. But tonight's negotiations are again underway, and Michael Burke is in Buenos Aires.
After 12 hours of exhausting negotiations, Mr. Haig took time off before yet another meeting with President Galtieri to play tennis. Nothing, not even his present transatlantic efforts to stop a war, gets between the Secretary of State and the tennis courts. He's obsessive about fitness, and despite a recent heart valve bypass operation, made short work of beating a fellow American diplomat. Off the court, at the negotiating table, he has bigger problems. He's been trying to reach a Falklands peace agreement that would leave the question of sovereignty open. As he told an impromptu news conference later, that's the crucial issue that remains.
Well, the question of sovereignty, it seems to me, is best not raised in the context of this current crisis. There are differing views on both sides on it, clearly. It's a subject for perhaps negotiation later. It's too early to say whether we will go on from here to Washington to report to President Reagan. We've stayed in very close touch from the outset of this, received his instructions daily. It's still too early to say. We could answer that question perhaps tomorrow or later tonight.
Then, more formally dressed, he left for his 3rd day of talks here with the Argentine president and other leaders who apparently are still refusing to make any real concessions over Falkland sovereignty.
It all adds up to pressure against any concession over Argentina's new ownership of the islands. One senior general said this morning, Argentine flexibility will never reach the point where we will have to lower our colours.
There's an increasing conviction tonight that Mr. Haig's peace mission has failed, and that only by resorting to force of arms will Britain remove the Argentines from the Falkland Islands and hoist the Union Jack over them once again. The chances of success for Mr. Haig have never been high. There have been times in London last Tuesday morning and in Buenos Aires yesterday when he was on the verge of giving up and going home. Only the consequences of failure kept him at it. But tonight, all the signs are that Mr. Haig is making no progress and that all he's doing now is hanging on in Buenos Aires in the forlorn hope that the junta generals will back down before it's too late. While he's in the area, he reckons neither side will escalate the crisis. The calm of Mrs. Thatcher's day, including a visit to church near Chequers, was in contrast to the frantic chasing around going on in Buenos Aires. She must be one of the few world leaders to walk around with a lone bodyguard or to be driven around in a 12-year-old official car. The air of calm was perhaps deceptive. Her return to number 10 tonight was the 2nd time she'd arrived there over the weekend. She slipped back late on Saturday night for a meeting with ministers, but she certainly seemed much refreshed by the break. There's really not a lot for Mrs. Thatcher and her officials to do at the moment other than keep a watch on Mr. Haig's progress, or more accurately, his lack of it. Seldom can Whitehall have been less communicative than it is being now. Mrs. Thatcher has decreed that one incautious word could have wide-reaching consequences, and so to all questions her staff give virtually the same answer. The Argentines must pull their forces out of the islands and return them to British administration, and then, and only then, can there be talks about the future. But there is an acceptance of the fact that diplomacy may not succeed, and that the oft-repeated words may soon have to be translated into deeds.
Britain has decided to increase its military options by calling up its Vulcan bombers. They're being modified to drop conventional instead of nuclear bombs and are being sent on training exercise off the north coast of Scotland. Our defence correspondent Christopher Wayne assesses this new capability.
Today's announcement indicates what the military planners have in mind. The Vulcans, based at Waddington in Lincolnshire, are to be re-equipped for conventional bombs instead of nuclear weapons, and are to start training exercises off the coast of Scotland. It won't take the Argentines long to realise that means crews will be practising navigation and radar precision bombing over islands at night and in bad weather. The Vulcan has particularly good radar, and it's capable of destroying the runway of Port Stanley Airfield, bombing from very high altitude. Such a raid would need to be launched from Ascension Island, and the Vulcans would need to be refueled in mid-air several times. But that wouldn't be a problem. The RAF has squadrons of Victor tankers, which could be used to top up the bombers' fuel tanks. Beyond Ascension Island, which now lies astern, the South Atlantic Task Force is now nearing the battle zone. Royal Marine Commandos aboard HMS Hermes have started checking over their landing craft. The ships are still a few days sailing from the Falklands, but before there can be any landing, the task force commander will need to gain control of the air.
In London, a letter of opposition to the task force was delivered to Downing Street this morning by the National Committee of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. They say they're concerned that the government has failed to deny suggestions that the fleet is carrying nuclear weapons, and their letter called for the withdrawal of the task force in favour of a negotiated settlement. Prayers for people in the Falklands and for members of the task force were said at a special service at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The worshippers were led by the Falklands Governor, Mr. Rex Hunt, and included others who have been expelled from the islands by the Argentine invasion force.
Oh, Almighty God.
The prayers remembered the people of the islands, the servicemen in the fleet, and those who are involved in peace negotiations in London, Buenos Aires, and Washington.
That by the power of thy Holy Spirit, peace may be established on the foundation of justice.
3 British journalists arrested in Argentina on suspicion of spying are to appear in court tomorrow. Ian Mather and Tony Prime of The Observer are being held in the country's southernmost port at Ushuaia, together with Simon Winchester of the Sunday Times. Both newspapers have strenuously denied any suggestion that the 3 could be guilty of military espionage. The 29 Marines captured during the Falklands invasion will be home on Tuesday, along with 13 British scientists on the Antarctic survey team. 7 of the Marines had hidden in the hills when the main islands were invaded. The others were captured when the Argentine troops seized South Georgia. They were flown to the Uruguayan capital of Montevideo by way of the Argentine military base at Comodoro Rivadavia. A report from Clive Ferguson.
Comodoro Rivadavia is where most of the Marine commandos spent at least some of their time. They weren't sure of their status, but were told at one point they were prisoners of war, and even learned Spanish to help in their escape plans. But in the end, they flew into Montevideo in military aircraft, 29 in all, 22 of them from South Georgia, where they'd resisted the invasion, shooting down, they say, 2 Argentine helicopters, damaging a frigate and killing at least 8. So fierce was their resistance that the Argentines counted them 3 times, refusing to believe that only 22 could have put up such a fight and only sustained 1 slight injury, even though they'd faced overwhelming odds in terms of both manpower and firepower. The Argentine commanders paid tribute to them and saluted them before disarming them, and the Marines lowered the Union flag, refusing to allow the Argentines to do so. On the other plane, 13 scientists, members of the British Antarctic survey team, looking somewhat more bedraggled than the Marines, though both parties said they'd been very well treated. They'd even discussed with their captors what would happen if England met Argentina in the World Cup. Publicly, though, even Lieutenant Keith Mills, the Marines commander on South Georgia, refused to say anything. That must wait until they land on British soil, probably within the next 36 hours. Until then, the Marines have to wait to tell their version of the invasion. Security at their hotel is so tight, they've not even been allowed to telephone home. Instead, they've been confined in the hotel, feeling frustrated at not being able to go straight home, but also reveling in the tales of what one of them described as a good scrap.
Back on the Falklands, more details have emerged through an American television news team of the way the Argentine troops are settling in, determined, as Michael Burke reports, not to lower the Argentine flag.
That flag flies high over Port Stanley Airport, where more troops are being airlifted in almost every hour. There's been no break in the military build-up, even when there was optimism over a diplomatic settlement in Buenos Aires. The reinforcements are mainly infantry. Armoured vehicles brought in shortly after the invasion are now dug in out of sight at key points around the islands. Although Port Stanley is the main staging base, the soldiers are being quickly moved to likely landing points for any British attack. They're having to live mostly in the open, in temperatures around zero. There is, it's said, a shortage of food. The troops have apparently supplemented their rations by killing some local sheep. Their commanders say morale is still high. They're prepared to take on the British. Any attempt at landing on the islands will result in heavy casualties.
Gauchos, the South American cowboys, staged a big demonstration in support of the invasion of the Falklands, or Malvinas as they call them. In the city of Cordoba, they paraded through the streets, declaring they'll defend the islands in the footsteps of a Gaucho folk hero who fought British rule on the Falklands over a century ago. The Gauchos, who had ridden in from the Pampas, have put themselves on a war footing, saying they'll fight the British over the islands.
The Pope has made a further appeal for a peaceful end to the Falklands crisis. Speaking in Bologna, he said peace was increasingly in danger because of the confrontation between Argentina and Britain. At least 20 Jewish men and women have locked themselves in a wartime bunker at Yamit in the Sinai as a protest against Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territory. Despite the appeals of rabbis outside an airshaft, the protesters say they'll kill themselves if troops try to force them out, as they're doing elsewhere in the camp. 2 weeks ago, a group of 18 religious zealots barricaded themselves in the same bunker. They said they had food supplies to last for months and a store of protective equipment, including gas masks. Their complaint was that the Israeli government had no right to give away land given to them by God. Their leader has already served jail terms in America and Israel for inciting violence. After a series of explosions that wrecked a Madrid telephone exchange and caused havoc in Spain's communications system, the Spanish cabinet has met in emergency session. 5 gunmen thought to be Basque terrorists broke into the exchange in the night to plant 4 bombs. They left after firing at a police patrol. At least 5 people were slightly hurt. The Queen seen off by Prince Philip on her way home after a visit to Canada to sign the Independence Proclamation. The Prince himself is flying on to Seattle on business. The Irish Prime Minister, Charles Haughey, has tonight ordered an investigation into reports that an unidentified submarine overturned and sank a trawler in the Irish Sea. It happened near Clougher Head. The 6 crewmen who were rescued insisted it was a submarine that dragged them along. Earlier, the crew of another Irish trawler said that something underwater had taken away its net and lines. The Ministry of Defence in London refused to say if there's been a British submarine in the Irish Sea at present. The 300th anniversary of the founding of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania has been commemorated in Buckinghamshire. It's there that William Penn, the founder of the American city, is buried at the Quaker village of Jordans. 50 leading Philadelphians here for the ceremonies began their day at the nearby village that still bears his family name. Patrick Burns reports.
The parish church at Penn provided an ideal English Sunday morning setting for the visitors from Philadelphia, literally the city of brotherly love. And just as in Pennsylvania, reminders of William Penn abound. Justice and mercy was his own personal motto. The nearby village of Jordans is the home of the Quaker movement. It's here that Penn was buried with his 2 wives and 10 of his 16 children. The Philadelphians presented the meeting with a Windsor yew chair dating back to William Penn's time. In return, they received an antique linen tablecloth depicting Penn's celebrated treaty with the Red Indians, a treaty never ratified by oath, but never broken. The Pennsylvanians will return to Philadelphia aboard the QE2, which will make her first voyage up the Delaware River in a week's time.
That's all from us. Good night.